Dr. Vianne Timmons, President of Memorial University, and my preferred pronoun is she and her. I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which Memorial University campuses are situated. These are the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Inuit of this beautiful province. I am thrilled to welcome Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Minister Seamus O'Regan to Memorial this evening. Welcome to you both.
Glad to be here, Vianne.
Welcome, Minister.
Thank you, Vianne. It's good to be here, as always.
You know, this was so fun to put together. We had more than 600 members of our community who put their name in to ask questions tonight. And I want to thank everyone who expressed interest in this opportunity. What we did is we used a random number generator to choose a group of students, faculty, and staff who are on your screen to join us in this WebEx event. And over the next 60 minutes, I'm going to introduce each speaker by name, and I'm going to work hard to pronounce the names correctly before they pose a question to our Prime Minister. And we're going to do our best to get everyone in the time we have. So we're going to keep the questions concise so all of us can have a chance to ask one. And then I want to say hello to those who are viewing this town hall live on YouTube. Mom, I hope you figured it out, how to click on YouTube, because I know you were trying. Prime Minister Trudeau, before I hand the floor over to you, I am going to take a moment and do a commercial for Memorial University. As you know, Memorial is Newfoundland and Labrador's only university, and we have a special obligation to this province. And we will be celebrating 100 years in 2025, so you'll be welcome to our campus then. This semester, we achieved the largest enrollment in our history, in the middle of a pandemic, no less. We now have over 19,000, almost 20,000 students from 115 countries studying in more than 100 degree programs in our 4 campuses, St. John's, Grenfell, Labrador, and Harlow, England. And we have amazing, amazing students, faculty, and staff who all pivoted quickly to remote and online learning. And it hasn't been easy, as you know. We're proud of Memorial as an economic driver in this province. And Minister Seamus O'Regan, you're no stranger to Memorial and the great things happening here. And Minister, I'll turn the floor over to you now.
Okay, I'm going to make this very quick because I meant to introduce the Prime Minister. I'll just say this. I did not have the benefit of going to Memorial University of Vianne. Both my parents did. They were 2 of the first graduates, actually, not to betray their age. But because I grew up like you did in Labrador and grew up in Goose Bay, my folks didn't think that I'd be able to handle the big city of St. John's. So they made me go to a smaller Nova Scotian university called St. X. Not bad, not a bad university, but I missed out on the Memorial experience. I'm going to make this quick because the last time I introduced the Prime Minister in St. John's, really, and not virtually, he said, you got 2 minutes, 2. And on the 2-second mark, he just walked out onto the stage, and the applause looked after itself. So I got about 30 seconds left. I will say this: look, the man has delivered $2.5 billion through the Atlantic Accord Review Agreement. That's $2 billion over the next 10 years. Revenues that will stay right here in the province. $400 million almost to support offshore workers and to make the oil and gas industry competitive in the 21st century. To reduce emissions, to make it competitive. Millions for our growing tech sector. Nothing gives me more joy in the past few weeks than announcing our investments in the tech sector here. So proud of it, and millions in wage subsidies that we should never take for granted as we get through this pandemic. For Memorial itself, the $100 million for that science building, which just gets more and more beautiful every day, every time I see it. $8.6 million for that Signal Hill campus. Millions in research and innovation, which is where it should be. And since he became Prime Minister, I'm very proud that over 1 million Canadians have been lifted out of poverty. That's over 350,000 children and about 79,000 seniors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Thanks, Seamus. It's always great to be back in Newfoundland, if only if only virtually. It is a real pleasure to be able to kick off one of the first virtual town halls I've done. As some of you will know, town halls are one of my favorite things, where I really get to hear from a wide range of people with a whole bunch of different perspectives. And obviously, in this pandemic, it gets harder to get out and be in a crowded auditorium with a whole bunch of interested students or others. As I was with Vianne back at University of Regina a number of years ago for one, and I'm really glad to be joining you all here in Newfoundland for this one. I don't want to say too much. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all, but I just want to highlight that we are going through a particularly difficult time right now with this pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of loss across the country, around the world. It's a double-barreled crisis that's both a health crisis and an economic crisis. And I think Canadians can really be proud of how collectively we've managed to come through this. Canadians were there for each other. We all stepped up. We figured things out within the Atlantic bubble. You've certainly done extremely well. But right across the country, we've seen companies, families, individuals, healthcare workers, frontline workers step up in amazing ways across the country. And particularly when it comes to students who are really tossed into a lurch with the end of the last school year, with this school year being a little more difficult, with so much happening virtually, with being distanced from so many friends and families, the ability to travel being significantly cut down. We've all had to make adjustments, and people have also have to worry about what impact this is going to have, not just over the coming months, but over the coming years and even decades. This crisis is going to affect people and have impacts that will resonate over a long time. And how we make it through really matters for how many negative impacts will happen over the coming years and decades. That's why, as a government, but across orders of government, we all decided to step up. I mean, the federal government sent off the CERB, the wage subsidy, the CEBA small business account, the rent subsidy, direct support for families with an increase to the CCB, direct support for seniors, including with the GST rebate, moving forward on support specifically for students with the Canada Emergency Student Response Benefit, with investments in jobs and opportunities. And young people have really stepped up across the country to ask how they can help and be involved in so many different ways in this crisis of the generation that we're part of. So it's been a privilege to be part of Canada's response to this pandemic. It's been something to see, to sort of look at the comparators with countries around the world on how Canadians are stepping up to be there for each other with not some of the challenges that we're seeing elsewhere. But also it's been a real privilege to be part of a government that has focused on having people's backs. And that's certainly something that Newfoundlander and Labradorians know an awful lot about. Being there for each other through tough times to make it through to the good times. And that's why I'm so glad to be digging into to what's on your mind this evening. Really looking forward to this conversation. Bien sûr, vous pouvez poser vos questions dans nos deux langues officielles si ça vous tente. C'est un moment pour nous de se rassembler et de travailler ensemble pour réfléchir à l'avenir qu'on va bâtir ensemble. While we're getting through this pandemic, we're going to focus on getting people through it. But at the same time, we do have to think about what comes next, how we fill the gaps that this pandemic has shown, how we build back better in a more digital, in a fairer way, in a more equitable way, and also how we prepare for a much greener future, a much more technologically savvy future, how we think through the transformations that our economy is going to go through in the coming decades, and how we make sure Canadians are leading in all of those areas. That's what I'm excited about for the coming years, but in order to get to there, we've got to make it through here, and that's my focus right now. So I'm with that, I'm happy to turn it back to you guys and look forward to digging in.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Now, we haven't vetted any of these questions. I have no idea what the panelists are going to ask. All I know is they're enthusiastic to be here with you. So it's time to hear from our panelists. I'm going to call each one by name, and they'll ask the question of our Prime Minister. I'll begin with Alex Stewart.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Prime Minister, as an entrepreneurship professor, I am interested in your views of the way the federal government can help facilitate the contributions of universities to Canadian economic progress and global competitiveness.
Thank you, Alex, for your question. Well, first of all, we know that where our competitiveness is going to come from in the coming years is through innovation, through the knowledge economy, through thinking out and developing solutions. We know that we have a lot of really strong innate advantages on that. We have an incredibly creative, well-educated, value-driven, hardworking population that is ready to imagine and to build a better world. We have an incredibly diverse population as well, and everything we know about how to generate creativity and new ideas is you don't put 10 people with exactly the same backgrounds and profiles into a room and ask them to solve something and expect to come up with something new and innovative. You create collisions of people from all sorts of different backgrounds and stories and life experiences and areas coming together to work on shared problems and challenge each other and learn from each other. And that's what Canada does extraordinarily well. We also know that there's a lot of people who put a sort of either or between, well, Canada used to be hewers of wood and drawers of water, and now we want to be AI and robotics, so we have to turn our back on that. I'm sorry, but our natural resources are a natural advantage to which we can apply the innovative thinking, the creative solutions. I mean, as we just talk about what we're going to need for a more digital and electronic and technological future, think about all the rare earth minerals that we need for batteries, the copper for wirings, the natural resources that are going to be part of these advances. I mean, the fact that we create the cleanest aluminum in the world in Canada and are working to do even better are the kinds of things that I think are really, really exciting. But what we need to do is create even more opportunities for innovation and for people to come here and be excited about it. I think there are some challenges in the United States these days around immigration, around investing in science, around looking forward to the future in many positive ways. We've benefited from people coming here instead and even coming here from there. How we can create these ecosystems that draw in investors, where people realize Canada's got an incredibly bright future with reaches around the world, with our trade deals, with our populations, but also with the tremendous success that we have here. I've been really excited to hear as Seamus and Andrew Fury have been talking my ear off about all the technological innovation going on in St. John's these days, and I know MUN has a big part to play in that. So I'm excited about where we're going in terms of innovation for the future.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Minister O'Regan, for plugging Memorial. Alison Ann Cloughton. Oh, you have to demute. Unmute.
I live in a rural area called Bunyan's Cove, and I'm a first-year student at MUN. And next year, I'm planning on doing dental hygiene out of province since it's not offered here. But I was wondering if COVID-19 continued and schools stayed closed on campus, how would I be able to do like the hands-on portion of my course to like gain work experience?
Listen, there's no question that COVID has brought in very real challenges for all of us, Alison. But I mean, you've gotten a real clear one where you can do a lot of theory and a lot of conversations and a lot of remote learning, but that hands-on practical experience is a significant barrier. I am confident that we're going to be able to solve that. I'm confident that through partnerships and co-ops with local professionals, people are going to figure out how to create practicums that can work. I also can't help but think that a lot of the things we're learning how to do via Zoom, via WebEx, via conversations like this are going to stick around even after we've got the vaccine and are through this pandemic in a few years or a few months, hopefully. But I'm not projecting. There's things we figured out how to do that we will happily carry forward into the future, and will accelerate the transformation towards a world in which, being in a remote location or having geographic challenges isn't the barrier it used to be. And I think that's really, really exciting, because if you think about the way the digital and connected world is going, location shouldn't be an impediment to fully participating and contributing to the global economy in tremendous ways. And people, I think, are going to be choosing to live that better quality of life by finding the smaller communities and not having to be stuck in our big cities. And that's a really empowering thing. We just have to make sure that the infrastructure is there to help out. So obviously, making sure that you have access to the kind of broadband you're going to need right across the country, because it's not just a luxury anymore, it's a basic necessity. And that's why as a government, we're massively investing in accelerating access to high-speed internet right across the country. But more than that, there are always going to be needs for tangible and concrete challenges to solve, like you laid out, Alison. So I know people are going to reflect on that and think about how it can do it. Maybe it's a temporary time away, maybe it's local practicums. Every situation might be difficult, but looking for those hybrid models that have become so common now of a little bit of online distance stuff and some in-person things, I think is going to shape our society for many years to come.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Alison.
Thanks.
Kamal Mohammed Ali.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Prime Minister Trudeau. I'm an international student from Egypt, and I'm a third-year computer engineering student at MUN. So the engineering program here has 4 mandatory co-op terms, and due to the pandemic, the number of co-ops available in the job market has notably declined, leaving many students without a co-op, including myself. And although the international and domestic students were equally affected by the pandemic, federal government unemployment grants such as Venture for Canada are only for domestic students. My question is, what initiatives can the federal and provincial governments take to address this issue and provide more equal opportunities for all students?
International students have always been a really important part of Canada's success, Canada's success as a country and as education systems, but also a contribution to the world. I mean, we know people who come to study in Canada and then return home or move elsewhere bring tremendous benefit from it and ties to Canada. But I also know that one of the things we need to do is create better pathways to citizenship for international students. I think having someone come to Canada, study successfully for a number of years, live, sometimes work part-time, obviously develop language skills and get anchored in Canada, that's a natural opportunity for us to give a pathway to citizenship that's going to contribute to a country that has grown so much and relied so much on immigration. And indeed, over this past year, with our borders closed, it's been more challenging to reach our existing immigration targets. So I think it's natural that we look to accelerating the processes or trying to look differently at the people who are here already and looking at how we develop status for them. Part of the reflection that we're also having, as we've just made some moves around the federal government on permitting international students under certain conditions to actually come back to Canada for those who weren't here the whole time, or come to study in Canada, to set up, we're going to have to adjust and make sure that you're getting the full opportunities to have the education that you've come here for. So co-ops and practicums and those sorts of things are going to be incredibly important, because they're not add-ons to your education. They are integral to your education and to being able to do what you do. And the federal government will be there to work with institutions and communities across the country to try and make sure that you're not getting the short end of the stick in terms of the education that you need to get and that we need you to get in order to contribute to the world, Kamal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Prime Minister. Yeah. Oh, you have to unmute, yes.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm a second-year computer science student here at Memorial University, and I want to ask you about budget cuts that the universities across Canada are facing. So a lot of universities have been getting budget cuts, which means faculty members being laid off and courses not being available for students, which are necessary for us to learn and to launch into professional careers. So my question is, does the government not consider post-secondary education as important as the primary one? And what is the government doing to challenges of the budget cuts?
Listen, we are a government that understands deeply that post-secondary education is absolutely essential to have the most productive and successful country we possibly can have. We're a very small country of just 37 million people in a massive world in which we are competing with much, much larger countries all the time. And we need to make sure that our competitive advantage is that as many people as possible have access to all the education pathways that they need in order to succeed. And that's why investing in education, in science, and research has always been a real priority for this government. We reversed a number of budget cuts from previous years in science, from previous governments, in science, in research, in supporting our institutions. Seamus talked a little bit about some of the investments we've made in Memorial and other post-secondary streams, but there's always more to do. Investing in education is always a partnership. Some federal government, a lot of it is provincial government as well. We all need to work together to make sure that we're fully able to prepare students for all the challenges that the world is going to bring. Budgets are never infinite, so there's always choices that need to be made. But hopefully the choices that are being made are the ones that are going to respond to what you need and make sure that the future is one that you can fully tackle. So thanks for your question, Yaksh.
Great. Thank you. Basim Abbas.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Good evening, Prime Minister Trudeau. I'm Basim. I'm a first-year international undergraduate student doing my courses remotely from Saudi Arabia. Let me say that everything is professionally facilitated by the government, but I just had one concern. I've applied for my study permit online more than 3 months ago. I totally understand the delays and closures caused by the pandemic, but till now I didn't receive a final decision, and as far as I know, no one in my region did. So when to expect further processing in our applications to be able to come to Canada?
I can tell you, Basim, that earlier this week we moved forward on a number of agreements with the provinces that, if they haven't been announced yet, should be announced soon. That will create a framework for a certain number of international students to come to approved institutions. We know that there are going to be requirements for quarantine to make sure that if you come, we can be sure that you're not bringing COVID, because we have to be very careful about the spread. So 2 weeks of quarantine is going to be necessary, and we have to make sure that when you arrive, you're able to properly quarantine. But those are things that are being worked out right now between the federal government, the provinces, and institutions. So I can tell you that we have been working hard on this, and hopefully there will be very good news for you soon.
And we've
Thank you.
reached that agreement. I think, Prime Minister, we've reached that agreement. So we're Newfoundland and Labrador. We now have everything in place for that. So great question. Mohammed Jafari.
Thank you, Ms. Timmons. Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. My name is Mohammed. I'm a second-year computer science student here at MUN. The question that I have is only a general question on behalf of all international students here in Canada. It has been so great studying and living here. What I really want to know is that if you have any plans for supporting us in this COVID situation. I know you have been so kind to us, especially considering international students in programs like CERB, which was very, very life-saving for some of us. But in general, do you have any plans for international students specifically, or anything else? Thank you.
No, thank you, Mohammed. We're going to continue to support students. We know that this is a pivotal time where you need to be able to plan out how your studies are going, how you're going to pay your rent, how you're going to be able to make it through, and what the world might look like at the end of it. So it's already filled with anxiety. Our priority naturally needs to be to try and support Canadians first and foremost, but we also know that international students are contributing a tremendous amount to our research communities, to our institutions, but also many of you on a path to citizenship. So we do need to make sure that you're getting the supports necessary. There's always a balancing act in terms of need, in terms of response, in terms of not having unlimited resources, but we made a commitment to have people's backs and making sure we're taking care of everyone in Canada and giving everyone the tools to do what's necessary to stay safe and build a better future is an investment in the future. People point out how we've invested and supported so many Canadians through these past months. How much longer can we do it? And my answer is we're going to keep supporting people as long as we need to, because if you think it's expensive to support Canadians, imagine how expensive it would be if we didn't support people across this country, force people to go into debt, force people to lose their homes, force people to have to rely on borrowing on their credit cards to pay for groceries. You would have a level of economic destruction of our society that would leave us much, much worse off. Yes, we're supporting people so that they don't have to go into debt, because we know that Canada's ability to come back strongly afterwards, for people like you and everyone in our schools and everyone across the country to be able to make it through this without having had too many long-term impacts and effects, is going to position Canada extremely well for the coming years. So that's why we're looking to take care of everyone in the country as best we possibly can.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you,
Great.
Mohammed.
Dr. Kelly Hobart.
Thanks, President Timmons, and good afternoon, I guess, for you guys, Prime Minister Trudeau. Prime Minister Trudeau, yeah. So I just wanted to start off by saying, and it's not a question, first of all. No, sorry, I'll try to be brief, President Timmons. I just wanted to say that I as a researcher for the last 20 years, how you have reinvigorated NSERC and the tri-agencies has been excellent. And I'm not saying that to suck up, because I'm pretty sure you don't have any control over my NSERC grant, unless you do, in which case I'm completely sucking up. But I'd like to thank you for that, because I've been on those committees over the last few years, and there were some very dark times. Maybe a decade ago, and there's been a big change. So I'd like to thank you for that. Just quickly building on Alex's question at the beginning. So we've seen lots of really excellent grants in the bioeconomy. That's where I work, in trying to convert natural. I'm a chemical engineer. I should have said that. I'm a professor in process engineering, and we work on taking residues, bioproducts to forestry, fishery, natural resources to bioproducts. And there's been a lot of really good grants announced in that area lately. The only kind of issue I have with it is sometimes they're really geared towards larger scale. So it favors regions that have very large demographics, when really the natural resources are in rural and communities like Atlantic Canada. And so it's harder to engage, like Alex was talking about, the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, because there's such a big time for funds. So is there plans to try and maybe target more small and medium-sized universities and enterprises in this important area? Thanks.
No, listen, thank you, Kelly. And I'm always glad to hear the positive feedback. We made a decision a number of years ago to reinvest in science massively and try to make up for some of the lost ground during a decade of underinvestment in science. I'll sort of leave it at that. But we were pleased to be able to do that. Obviously, as we're trying to get things going again, there are certain areas where you can get quick returns that we turn to. But there's no question that smaller organizations, smaller universities, smaller research projects often come up with some of the most innovative and valuable discoveries and developments that we have. So getting better webs of connections to be able to see into what some of those more remote and challenging areas are to fund. I know that the money can go even further if you target it on places where you're really squeezing it out. So there's a lot of logic in doing that, and I know it's something that we've talked about a lot, where we are making significant efforts to improve that flow of funding to smaller projects, but we need to. It's something we're also trying to do in a lot of different ways. We find micro grants to small community organizations can often result in much greater changes than funding the local, massive volunteer organization. Even in international development, working with small grassroots organizations that are sometimes a lot harder to see gives you much better impact if you're funding 100 of those, as opposed to just giving a massive block to one big organization. So I don't want to underfund our great, massive research centers, but recognizing that sometimes you get the best value by finding those little pockets and creating a better linkages, better visibility into those areas is really important to me. And using this pandemic of, you can't tell how big the university is when you're on the other side of a screen and talking about the project. I think we've created more connections through this that I hope will translate into better funding for some of the innovative research that you and others are doing. The other thing that I meant to talk about with Alex, but how we look at intellectual property and figure out how to create value for institutions, value for researchers, create that possibility to start up and scale up from things that we've developed here, processes that Canadians solve that should be leveraging success for us around the world, is something I'm also very interested in. I'm a huge believer in primary fundamental science, and we always need to do that because you never know where that's going to go. So my focus isn't always on commercialization, but giving a few more tools to be able to run with it when you have commercially viable opportunities, I think is just a natural fit. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Prime Minister. Xinbang Chen.
Good evening. Thank you for your presence, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, and thanks everyone contributing to this town hall. And my name is Xinbang Chen from China, and I'm currently a Master of Education student in MUN. Well, my question is about racism. So we all know Canada is a country that values diversity, and it is true. So in most of public occasions, we see most people are very friendly. But when I went to the internet, I've seen a lot of vicious comments against the Chinese people, Chinese community. It seems like people are speaking out their minds in that virtual environment anonymously. So, and the things seems getting worse after the outbreak of the pandemic. So I would like to hear the Prime Minister, how would you address such kind of racism against Chinese people in Canada?
No, thank you, Xinbang Chen. Thank you for your question, and thank you for sharing something that is a real challenge. We've seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiment, anti-Asian racism over the past months. Some of it related to the pandemic, some of it just generally linked to the rise in intolerance that we're seeing in some corners of the internet. As you point out, we've seen a rise in anti-Semitism. We've seen a rise in anti-Black racism. We're really seeing challenges around anti-Indigenous racism as well that have gone on for far too long. We need to do better as a country, as a society. The first thing to do is to recognize that we do have challenges, that we have structures and systems that have not done a good enough job of reducing barriers for everyone or treating everyone fairly. And that's part of the systemic racism that we need to address. But more than that, when it comes to online hate, for a long while, people would just, be frustrated at how nasty and negative online comment boards were and how easy it is to spread hate on the internet. And it was a significant problem in itself. But what we're increasingly seeing is what happens on the internet no longer just stays on the internet, and it now leads to radicalization, to violence. It leads to horrific real-world actions that have devastating consequences on communities. That's why we all have to stand together. I mean, Canada is one of those incredibly lucky countries that has figured out how to understand that diversity can and should be a source of strength, not a source of weakness or division, that having different perspectives is an exciting way to bring new thoughts and new creativity and new stories to build a better future. And our ability to do that relies on people feeling comfortable, feeling safe, being able to contribute. So it's something we all have to be knowledgeable about. It's all something we all have to step up on. We need to do a better job on this. We've funded a lot of different initiatives and organizations as a government. Recently, we just funded an initiative with the YWCA called Block Hate. That's very much community oriented, tackling hatred and violence on the internet that leads to real world outcomes. But it's not something we can just sort of sit back and hope someone else does. We all need to be part of it. We need to speak up in the face of intolerance. We need to reach out to people and try to have them come along to understanding that differences shouldn't be scary. They should be exciting and challenging, and learning from each other, and allowing our country to understand that diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And making that choice around inclusion is unbelievably important for our future as a country. So I'm just encouraging you and everyone to continue to stand against intolerance and racism in any kind. It has no place anywhere in Canada. We will continue to work together to build a better future.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Such an important issue. Thank you, both of you. Lisa Charlon-Norris.
Good evening, Prime Minister. I grew up in Trudeau mania, by the way. So it's a real honor for me to be here this evening and to be able to be part of this panel and this event. I am a research grants facilitator at MUN with two departments, the Faculty of Education and the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation. I polled colleagues, friends, my mother for questions this evening. I won't ask my mother's because it's about Trump and how to get rid of him. So I won't ask that one, though. The question that I will ask is there's so much going on right now, unprecedented events, both medically, politically, and socially. What is the federal government doing right now to ensure that we stay on track implementing the 94 TRC recommendations?
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that question. And reconciliation is just so fundamental for me, for Canada. We need to actually understand that partnership with Indigenous peoples, shared stewardship of the land, whether we're talking about being more responsible environmentally or just living in more fair and prosperous communities, we need to do it in partnership with Indigenous peoples. For far too long, colonial policies like the Indian Act, like residential schools, like all the assimilationist policies that existed in the past and that still trickle into our institutions today need to be addressed. And it's not going to be easy. We got elected 5 years ago, and Canadians asked us to tackle reconciliation in a real and big way. And we did a lot of things. I mean, we've opened up a whole bunch of new schools, invested massively in healthcare. We've worked on child and family services so that Indigenous kids at risk get to stay in their communities and cared by their communities instead of yanking them out so they lose their culture. We've moved forward on protecting languages with historic legislation. We've ended close to 95 long-term boil water advisories with lots more to go. But at the same time, a lot of that are just the first steps. And for everything we are able to do, there are so many more we need to do more on. And at one point, we do run into a place where it can't just be about the federal government and Indigenous peoples, fixing things, or the federal government trying to repair things. It comes down to all of us and all our orders of government and all our institutions to look at how we can be part of this shift, this journey of reconciliation. What's going on with the Mi'kmaq right now in Nova Scotia is an example of that, of long-time rights that have been recognized through the Marshall decision and others, that the Mi'kmaq have rights that we need to recognize. We haven't yet been able to fully articulate those rights into policies that fit and that don't clash against non-Indigenous peoples in sort of a zero-sum game. We need to change that. We need to engage with the Mi'kmaq in direct nation-to-nation discussions, but also bring along non-Indigenous Canadians who, some of them are worried about their livelihood and their kids' livelihoods and their future, and we need to reassure them around that. But a lot of them also want to see the path of reconciliation be real. So the work that we're doing is tough, and it's not going to be any quick fixes. And indeed, we don't want Band-Aids, because Band-Aids never hold for long. We need to make real changes, and all of us need to be part of it. All of us need to learn. All of us need to understand that reconciliation involves non-Indigenous people every bit as much, if not more, than Indigenous people. And starting from a place of respect, of recognition, of partnership is essential for how we move forward. And quite frankly, that's the only way we can start to be the country that we like to think of ourselves as, the world's good guys and human rights and fairness and all those things that we like to think of Canada as. Well, we need to do a much better job in respecting and partnering with Indigenous peoples if we are really going to build the kind of future we want for this country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Justin Deering.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons, Minister O'Regan, and Prime Minister Trudeau. I lead the Sustainability and Climate Action Office here at Memorial, and I was preparing a question about climate change when a thought hit me that I couldn't shake, and I had to go with my gut. Prime Minister, you may or not be aware, but one of our Memorial family, our Dean of Engineering and Applied Science, Dr. Greg Naderer, is in BC this very moment, combing the Manning Park area, searching for his missing son, Jordan. As a father, personally, it's heart-wrenching to read Dr. Naderer's tweets, begging for local authorities to renew the search given new findings. And so I'm unable to shake the thought of what if my one question to you could help them. So, Prime Minister, with deep compassion and humility, may I ask, is there any way you or your staff might be able to encourage additional support in the search for Jordan? Thank you.
Listen, no one can imagine what Greg is going through right now, and I know the entire community is thinking of him and supporting him as best they can as he searches for Jordan. I can't personally hear that story and not think about my little brother who was lost almost 25 years ago in beautiful mountains in BC, and the efforts that went into trying to find him, and how I felt when the search was called off. I have no words except deep compassion and thoughtfulness, and I promise you, Justin, I will look into this. I will see what the decisions have been made, and there's limited leverage I have even as Prime Minister over a local issue and a local search like that. But I can certainly ask about it and try and see if there isn't something that I can nudge a little bit, because I know the heartbreak that the Nader family and the entire community is going through right now.
Deepest thanks.
No, thank you.
This is hard on our campus, as you know. Thank you, Prime Minister, and our thoughts and wishes are with the family. Amira Malam Hassan.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Good evening, Prime Minister. My name is Amira. I am from Mauritius. I am currently in my second year studying business administration. My question today is going to be about tourism in Canada. The tourism industry is very important to Canada. However, traveling within Canada itself is very expensive and pricey. I was wondering if there is any plans to make travel and tourism within Canada more affordable and accessible to all. I believe that this would not only allow Canadians to discover the country more, but it would also boost the economy of different provinces. So yeah, my question would be, do we or could we have a plan to make traveling within Canada more accessible?
Absolutely. We do have plans, and we've been working on them, encouraging people to visit Canada, particularly with the challenge of COVID and borders being closed. The influx of tourists from around the world, not just the United States, but overseas as well, has completely dried up and has really affected a lot of communities that are incredibly beautiful, but relied on foreign tourists. Yes, many Canadians have done a lot more traveling internally. It's hard to get to the point where we can replace international travelers, though. But I certainly know that certain areas, I was speaking to friends in Gaspésie in Quebec who were saying that tourism was booming for them all summer, but other friends who live in the Northern Territories, for example, in the Yukon, are really, really hurting because far fewer people are going up there. A lot of it is COVID related. I mean, I have a lot of friends who would have loved to come visit Atlantic Canada this summer, but who weren't able to because of the COVID bubble. But at the same time, I think people are also discovering the value of traveling at home, and even once border restrictions are lifted, are likely to follow up and continue to travel across our country. So we're going to continue to encourage people to pick Canada as a destination and get to know not just beautiful parts of the country, but wonderful people who are similar and different from you on opposite ends of the country. It's a way of binding the country together as well, and something certainly we're going to continue to invest in and facilitate. We need a strong tourism industry in this country. It's an incredible driver of our economy. We need to make sure that Canadians can fully participate in it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Amira.
Thank you. Dr. Cynthia Boyd.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons, and thanks for this opportunity, Prime Minister. I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. While I am currently a student at Memorial, I've also had the opportunity and the privilege to teach at Memorial as a part-time lecturer in the Department of Folklore. I'm currently faced, however, with the reality that I will likely have to retrain in another discipline or in another field altogether. As a woman in my 50s, and I suspect I'm voicing the concerns of many others, what kinds of programs or initiatives are in place or could be put in place to assist individuals such as myself to become more employable members of society?
The pace of change we are going through right now is just unprecedented. The acceleration of transformation of our economy from 1 year to the next, let alone 1 decade to the next, is mind-boggling. And we have a education system that was really based on a premise that, if you got trained up, into your early 20s, you could then, work a job until retirement before ever facing obsolescence. Now, the rate of churn in our workforce, in our technologies, in the transformation of our economy is going to require much more, a very different approach to training, which is why as of last year, we brought in something called the Canada Training Benefit that is designed to encourage people to go and retrain and give them opportunities. We changed the EI system, so now going to school, actually, you can continue to collect EI. We've created different measures to try and encourage that. But one of the things we've seen through this pandemic is we're going to have to really step it up an awful lot because the way the world is transforming, the kinds of jobs that have been lost, the profiles of people who've lost those jobs as well. This is a she session because it's so so strongly impacted on service industry and hospitality industry. Far more women in vulnerable positions have lost their jobs, and we need to figure out how to counter that. And that means investments in childcare. It means investments in community supports, but it also means making sure that access to training, access to new knowledge, access to new pathways to contribute needs to be free of barriers, free of stigma as well. There are huge challenges of, oh, no, I'd much rather hire someone younger than hire someone in their 50s. Well, you know what? We are living longer and longer as a society, and that's a great thing. And yes, some people will choose to or need to or be able to retire at 65 or at 60 or whenever. Others will choose to, will want to, will need to work much longer. And we need to be able to give them the opportunities to do that, to make those choices, to continue to contribute in very real ways. And that's going to require investments in technology, investments in training, investments in learning that, yes, the provinces have a role in, but the federal government needs to play in as well. It's a challenge for me. I'm a teacher by vocation, by calling. It's what I am, even though I happen to be working as Prime Minister right now. And being on the federal side keeps me far from education and learning. But I know that it's too important for us not to be involved in this. As we see an aging population, we need to get the very best out of not just our young people, not just our new Canadians, but of everyone to contribute and to continue to create the prosperity that we benefit so much in society. So I thank you for your question, Cynthia, and I especially thank you for your openness, your versatility, and your perseverance as you continue to learn wonderful new things, and hopefully will throughout your life, as I'm certainly counting on as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Cynthia. Margaret Steele, Dr. Margaret Steele.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons, and it's a real pleasure, Prime Minister Trudeau, to meet you. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine here at Memorial, proud to be. And I just want to expand a little bit more on the research environment, particularly that I know you've put a lot of money into it, the Manley report and a number of recommendations. But as you can imagine, during COVID, we've had significant effects on the health research, particularly in the Faculty of Medicine. So as the pandemic continues, and hopefully for not that much longer, because hopefully Canada will find the vaccine, what the federal government can do more to address the needs of the continuum of health research, from the fundamental bench lab research to clinical research to public health?
I think from a federal standpoint, we just have to do more. We have to continue to make sure that you're able to innovate, that you're able to do the research, that you're able to partner. I think one of the things that we've been excited about was various partnerships with private sector, with through super clusters, drawing in the biotech industry, drawing in commercial enterprises to have a role to play. I mean, it'll never replace the fundamental training and the research and the service that will always be at the heart of our healthcare system. But there's significant sources of funds out there that can be leveraged through government funds to increase right across the continuum. I think where government really does need to step up is take a careful look at where the funding from the private sector tends to go and say, okay, maybe we don't need to fund too much over there. Where are the gaps that aren't being funded right now? Because those are the discoveries that are really going to shine. Those are the areas where they need greater resources. So it's not just about chasing the shiny new object, but understanding that governments are well positioned to cover the fundamentals, to make sure that we're filling those gaps. Unfortunately, COVID has demonstrated that there are lots of cracks in our society, lots of gaps that we managed to sort of gloss over in normal times that through this crisis have really become glaring. There's I am certainly not the person who's going to tell you where we need to spend our money. I'm sure you have very strong ideas about it. We just need to make sure that as a government and as a society, we're giving you the capacity to input, to shape the decisions we make around allocation of funds so that we are preparing for all the possible futures and everyone's position within it.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you both. We'll go to Sandy Williamson.
Thank you, President Timmons and Mr. O'Regan, and hello to you, Prime Minister Trudeau. My question is, what is the hardest part about being Prime Minister during the pandemic?
The hardest part is knowing no matter how much I can do, no matter how much I try to do, no matter how much we've done, every single day Canadians are hurting. Every single day families are facing tragedies. And no matter how much we do exactly right, we're still going to be living with this pandemic for a good while longer still. So it's a question of trying to do the very best you can, of trying to pull together everyone and responding, concretely to fill as many different gaps as possible, to give people the support that is needed, but know that that for all our efforts, there's always going to be much more to do than any government can. We have, I think, done a pretty good job of trying to support everyone as quickly as we could. We've then supported organizations from food banks to shelters to smaller communities to Indigenous peoples to try and fill those more vulnerable gaps in populations. But for everything we do, there's more to do, and that's what we're just continually trying to do. At the same time as we're doing that, though, and our focus has to be on supporting people through this, we've also got to think about, okay, what does the after pandemic looks like? What have we learned through this that we're going to be able to carry forward as learnings that will both protect us from future crises, but also make sure our world is better? There's so much to think about and so much to do. I'm lucky to be surrounded by an amazing team, but I'm also really lucky to be able to connect with so many Canadians who they themselves are also thinking tangibly and concretely about how to make a positive difference. I think for all the tragedy we're facing, Canadians are also discovering things about being good neighbors, about being there for each other, about service, about stepping up, about helping, about doing the right things that will have long-lasting impacts. But there are some very, very, very difficult times that we're living through right now, and we just need to make sure we're being there for each other.
Great question.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you,
Prime
Sandy.
Minister, I'm watching the time. A couple of minutes left. We have about 6 more speakers. How about we take?
Sorry, you just cut out there. I don't know what that was.
I said our time, we're almost at the hour, and one more question, do you think?
Sure, absolutely. One more question.
And I'll apologize to the 5 people that we didn't get to your question, but you know, you're going to be able to share with your family. You hung out with the Prime Minister of Canada for the last hour. That's a pretty fun thing to share. Jonathan Kirby.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons, and thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister O'Regan. Climate change and reducing the impact on our environment has been near the top of the government's agenda for many years, most recently tagging the recovery from COVID-19 as the green recovery. And forgive me for quoting both you and Joe Biden, but helping our country build back better. A number of people have been saying that COVID-19 has provided the opportunity for your government to have a much more honest and tough conversation with the province, Newfoundland and Labrador, about the transition of their economies from fossil fuels to more renewable and sustainable energy. And I'm sure you've had initial conversations with both Premier Ferry and future Prime Minister O'Regan. My question is, what does that tough conversation look like for Canadians who rely on the energy industry for survival?
Yeah, thank you, John, for your question. And I'm glad to get a question on the environment because I felt bad at not answering that for Justin as well. So I'm glad to sort of loop in on both of you. Yeah, I think there are tough conversations to be had because you know, the world is changing, and we're facing, yes, this pandemic crisis, but also the larger climate change crisis. But I don't think of it as only tough conversations. I think it is opportunities to see where the world is going and position Canada as being a part of it. The transformation of our energy mix, for example, is not going to happen overnight. It is going to require a world that gradually becomes less dependent on fossil fuels and gets a better energy mix. And as we think of a lower carbon energy mix, and as we think of lowering the carbon emissions of our existing energy resources, there is a real need for an awful lot of innovation and technology and expertise that exists in the oil and gas sector, in Newfoundland and Labrador, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, and elsewhere. And that's something that, for me, framing it as a tough conversation and saying, this is a really bad thing you guys are going to go through because, we have to change our world, is not the right way to go about it. We don't get to net zero by 2050 unless the oil and gas sector is part of that transformation. We don't get there without Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador. We get there with them. We get there with that innovation, with that transformation, with figuring out how to do things differently, with the kind of knowledge and shifts that we have. I remember conversations that I heard that have been had around the just transition in a community in southern Saskatchewan that was basically built around thermal coal, and people who recognize that yes, all our jobs are in digging up coal right now and producing power with coal, but our kids' jobs probably aren't going to be on that. So how do we get to that place where we can have confidence that our kids will have great jobs? Now, Atlantic Canada is no stranger to transformations like that, whether it's the shutting down of the coal mines in Cape Breton, whether it's fisheries going from a massive industry to something that is under a significant amount more stress because of changing ecological conditions. We adapt, we adjust, and the thing is that we have to think about where the future is going and figure out how to make sure that all Canadians can play a part in that. We need to get to a lower carbon future. We can do that in ways that doesn't put the onus on just a few people who are really going to suffer, but that instead shares the opportunity and the transformation with everyone. When we brought in Canada's first price on pollution, we made sure that it wasn't an ordinary household that gets dinged by that, because we give a rebate back worth more than the average cost for a household of that price on pollution we've brought in. These are the kinds of things that reassure people that as we move forward, there is a path as well. So when we talk about either carbon capture and sequestration, or the exciting possibilities of hydrogen as an energy currency, or other elements of it, there's trillions of dollars in the global economy for people who can figure out how to innovate to those next energy solutions. And Canada is incredibly well positioned for that. Yes, because we have energy now that we have expertise in, but as we develop and as we transform that industry towards better and lower carbon solutions that are better aligned with the future, we create jobs. We create value that the rest of the world is looking at. I mean, we're busy comparing ourselves with, with other countries around the world who don't have massive energy industries. You know, Canada is one of the top energy producers and one of the only ones that has a real serious climate plan. Norway being the other one, and they've got a big head start on us. But we can do this, and we can pave the way and shape the way for the kinds of solutions that other countries are going to be looking to find. That's the path I'm looking to go at. It's not about, you know, pitting one region of the country against the other, because that's not the way forward. We just have to stop this dynamic of thinking that, you know, some people are saying, no, we can't do anything on the environment, and the others, well, we have to, you know, save the environment. That's the split that has to change. And I've spoken with many, many people in Alberta and elsewhere who know that the opportunities for the future as we transform our mix are rife with benefits and you know, profit opportunities for communities and for our country. We just have to figure out how to put it together. And having frank conversations is important. I saw something recently about Premier Kenny admitting that you know, being environmentally responsible is key to drawing in investment capital. Absolutely, it's something we've been saying for a long time, that you can't have a plan for the future of the economy if you don't also have a plan for the future of the environment. If you can't put those things together, you're not going anywhere. And I was glad to see, and I sort of, I've talked about it a lot on the world stage, at least when I was traveling a little bit before COVID, the fact that in Canada, we had an election on a price on pollution, on a carbon tax, if you want to use our opponent's words for it, and the consensus was clear that a significant majority of Canadians voted in favor of taking real action on building a better future and a lower carbon future. What we have to do as a country is do what we've always done, is be there for each other as we get there. Knowing that changes hit people differently in different regions, and those regions that are benefiting from it need to be there to support those who are going to find it a little more difficult, so we can all be contributing to building the right future for us all. So I'm excited about the opportunity to talk about building back better and greener, not because it's the morally right thing to do, although of course it is. It's because that's where the jobs are going to be. That's where the economic opportunities are. That's how we build the kind of future for the next generations that we know is going to make a huge difference on a worldwide scale. That's the conversation I'm excited about having, even as we move through this pandemic. What are those next steps? And we've got a lot to do, but I know we've got a lot of capacity to get it done as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Prime Minister. So I want to thank all of our participants, but a special thank you to Brian, Mark, Barry, Jonathan, and Fidel, who didn't get your questions asked, but that you came and you stepped up. It's really important that you get engaged. So Prime Minister, I want to close up the session with a thank you for all of the staff that in multiple departments and in your departments also, who worked hard to make this town hall happen. Thank you for that. And thank you to our participants. Thank you for everybody watching on YouTube. But I want to throw back to you, Prime Minister, for final words and a good night to everyone. And I will say again to the panelists, we hung out with the Prime Minister for over an hour, right? How many people get to do that? That's pretty.
Listen, I'm feeling lucky that I got to hang out with all of you because, quite frankly, one of the difficult things about this pandemic is how disconnected we're all feeling from each other. We end up in our little bubbles. We end up in our safe circuits. Yes, we spend too much time with our coworkers over virtual meetings these days, but being able to actually meet new people and hear from their concerns and talk about where we're going as a country is as important now as it has ever been, not despite the pandemic, but because of the pandemic. So, you know, my last thoughts are, let's just keep working together. Let's keep dreaming big for this country. Let's keep rolling up our sleeves and figuring out not just how we can build a better future, but how we can help our neighbor right now, how we can continue to be focused on the things that matter, and how we can ensure that we're building the kind of example for ourselves and for our neighbors that we need to be. Canada has amazing advantages, contrasting with the rest of the world, but we also therefore have amazing responsibilities that we need to step up to. And that's exactly what I've seen Canadians do from coast to coast to coast over the past number of months, and that's what we're going to continue to do. We're going to keep our sleeves rolled up. We're going to stay hopeful. We know that it's going to continue to suck for a little while over the coming months as we deal with COVID, but we're well positioned for vaccines. We're looking towards a summer next year that will be significantly better than we have right now. Canadians know how to get through a winter, and we're going to do it together. So thank you all for taking time with me tonight. Thank you all for everything you do. Merci mes chers amis et bonne soirée.
Thanks, Minister O'Regan, also.
Thank you.
Bonsoir. Thank you all. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Night, Seamus.